Well, hey there, everybody. It's Snackbox coming to you from a beautiful day down here in Basement Studio. I'm really excited to be here today. We are talking about one of my favorite projects for the year. Just a little while ago on YouTube, I posted a survey and I said, hey, everybody, listen, I'm going to the Smoky Mountains in May. I'd like to do a theme hike. And so I offered a number of different possibilities here. I said I could do a vintage hike. That's right. All of my gear would have been 40 years or older. And I said I could also do a super ultralight hike where I carry no more than 15 pounds into the woods for that weekend hike. I said I could do a gear hike where I use all gear that I've since moved on from in the past. And then lastly, I said, look, I could also do a super cheap, super budget gear hike. And that's what everybody voted on. And really, it was not even close. All of this cheap budget gear that you see behind me, that earned 52% of the vote. And I don't know if you know how democracy works, but basically 52% of the vote is usually enough to win. Not always. We'll have to check with the Electoral College. It could be I do a totally different hike, or maybe I give up the sport altogether. Who knows? We've got a lot to figure out and not a lot of time. Let's get to it, everybody. So let's get right down to brass tacks here. I started out with my Amazon account and about $200 in the budget. And full disclosure, some of the items didn't come straightforward from Amazon, but I still tried my hardest to stay under that $200 limit. And there's still a couple of odds and ends that I might need to pick up before I take off on the hike, like a water purification system and a first aid kit, for example. Those are two big needs that I'm going to have going into the woods. But ultimately, I was pretty proud of myself for being able to stay under budget. And so I want to talk through the different items here. Some of this is sort of like a pseudo unboxing video where I'm going to show you, and some of them are still in the package. So I'm really excited about that, to be able to sort of see the first looks at this. So effectively what we have here is kind of a first looks video. Most of the items are coming off of Amazon, and then a few of the items are coming from other spaces. I want to start with the big three. That's your sleeping system, your backpack, and your tent. These are all items that I think there might actually be some potential, and I actually have some pretty high hopes for a few of the different items. This first item here, you won't believe it. This is a 45-degree bag, so it is certainly a summer bag. This is not an all year round bag, not even a 3-season bag. This is going to be a summer bag, but in the Smokies in May, this should be just fine. I have to tell you here, you won't believe the deal that I found. It's right there on the tag, 2 for $27 for this. This is the Gelert Hebog Classic. I don't know anything about this. I got it off of Eastern Mountain Sports. And so this is probably the best deal I saw for a sleeping bag that's brand new, $12, $13, $13.50, I guess, if you're getting technical. But it's a pretty decent deal if it works. And especially as a summer bag, it's nice because this is a great one to sort of step up from. And if I need to, I can add a liner to it or put a hot Nalgene bottle in it to kind of keep warm. Not terribly heavy here. You can see it's large, but it still has a lot of give. So I might have to pair it with a compression sack to kind of fit it in the backpack, but really excited about this. And I have an extra one. So if you are interested in testing one out yourself, let me know. Maybe we can work out a deal. I'll sell it to you for $27, somewhere in there. Real value. Next piece of gear is the sleeping pad. This one is the Northeast Outdoors. This, again, I know I said I was buying everything off of Amazon, or as much as I could. I actually got this from Sierra Trading Post for about $12, $13. And this is the kind of thing that my wife and I, when we go to Sierra Trading Post, will often buy extras because they have a lot of function and utility. They're great for sharing. They're also great for some added temperature control. If you have sleeping pad with a lower R value, you can put this underneath it. I'm really excited about this one because I think these are the safest bet for making sure that you're not going to end up on the ground entirely. This is just a great way to go for a beginner because it's super value, super light, but it is also bulky. So typically people will stick these on the outside of their backpack. And then whenever you step up to a lighter inflatable sleeping pad, they're a great option because you can still cut this up and use it as butt pads and sitting pads, that kind of thing. So just phenomenal value at $12, $13 and a good starting point. Now, the tent that is taking the world by storm here, this is the Underwood Aggregator. That's what everybody's been looking for, is a nice Underwood Aggregator. Now, the price on this, I got it on sale a little bit, it looks like, but it's still on sale for about $50, but it looks like the regular price is about $60, somewhere in there. This is a one-person tent. You can see here, I wanted to wait to open this until I could show you all and sort of open it together. So it's not actually even been out of this stuff sack, but I have some pretty high hopes for this. It's not terribly heavy. It's a couple of pounds, give or take. It's actually pretty small. It is a trekking pole tent, so I'm eager to see if it comes with the stakes because I didn't actually check that when I picked it up. Really eager to see that and see the sort of condition of it and see whether or not it looks like it's going to hold up in water. I did tell my wife about this tent, and her response was that she looks forward to spending my life insurance money. So do with that what you will. Some people have no faith. Great. Has a little compression strap, it looks like here. Some type of a tag just fell out. I'm hearing stakes in this puppy. So, you know, I'm gonna have to take this out and set it up. The material itself feels something akin to kind of a lighter version of what a JanSport backpack was made out of back in the day. So it has that sort of, that tougher sort of coarse nylon feel to it. And I think it will likely do fine in some light rain. I also am interested, hopefully, and in the Smokies, we're going to end up in some heavier rain and kind of get to really run it through the test. I think that's really the piece here that I'm curious about. I've seen a lot of people talk about cheap backpacking gear, but I haven't really seen a lot of people actually go out with cheap backpacking gear and test it out in the wild. So hopefully this will be able to put it through its paces. It looks like it has some pretty standard sort of mesh material, cheaper bug net material. So this is the piece that I have the most sort of optimism in. I think this could be really nice, but again, don't buy it until you check with me after the trip in May, and I'll let you know whether or not I think it's worth that money. And really and truly, what we're talking about with this is a starter setup, and a starter setup implies that eventually you're going to be upgrading your kit. And I think this is probably a great starter setup, because if it works and is operational, you can then step up to some of the other trekking pole tents that are going to be lighter, more reliable overall. I'm optimistic that there's a good chance maybe this does end up being a decent piece of gear. There's also equal chance that I die in the woods. So stay tuned. Be sure to click like and subscribe so you can follow along. And I promise that I will keep making videos as a ghost, even if I die in the woods, because I use a cheap tent that's not sufficient for those survival goals. So stay tuned for all of my ghost installments in the ghost series that'll be coming up after the Smokies trip when I get caught in a hurricane. All right, so we just came from the tent and now we're working our way through that big three. Now this here is the backpack that I scooped up. I got it for about $40, give or take, right at that $40 mark. It is the One Nice backpack, and you know how I love puns, so I had to get this one. I also, in continuity with the tent, I scooped up the one that is an orange color there. So I might need to name the whole challenge something orange related. I don't know, but I want you all to know that I went with the orange one because they had a blue one, but it was going to be $1 more. And that dollar can go a long way in Pop-Tarts for hiking. So I stuck with this one here. Might get a little noisy. I'm going to try to open it up real quick, see how we do. When you open it, you do it like the Hulk, right? You just got to... All right, so looking it over and kind of getting a feel for it, the zipper looks nice, and that's really one of the key features of a good backpack. The things that you're looking for in a decent backpack are a sturdy zipper that looks like it's smooth and that it's going to hold up pretty okay. So the zipper looks fine. The material does feel sort of cheaper than what you would get with a higher end backpack, but it doesn't seem like it's unusable per se. So it does feel like that's pretty decent. The other things that you're really paying for with the backpack, other than materials, it will be things like the seam. So on a really good backpack, you'll have double or triple seams right here. So whenever they seam it up, you'll have extra backup. So there's extra contact with the two pieces of material. So if you only have one seam, if that piece of thread comes loose or starts to split, then it's really weak there. And so having a double seam, you pay for double the labor, obviously, but you end up with quite a bit more security. So this does look to be something that has been sewn with one seam. And so certainly it's not one that I have a whole lot of hope for, particularly for the heavy stuff. But overall, if we're talking about a backpack that we're just trying to get a number of miles out of, kind of get enough ground to make sure that we like backpacking enough to really invest some more money, I think this one probably will be sufficient. I do want to flip it here and take a look. So on the chest piece here, the hip belt certainly feels really cheap. It's just foam. Feels really cheap here, but also doable for a weekend trip. So again, it's about that balance. You'll notice if you have a nicer bag, like a Gregory bag, this material on the hip belt will be molded. It'll be a much firmer, sort of denser foam that actually prevents the sweat from getting in there more. I do think this one looks like it's got a pretty decent setup here with the air channel going through the back. And so that's kind of nice, although the foam does feel kind of like it's just kind of cheap feeling, you know what I mean? And that's what we expected with a $40 backpack. But I do feel like this will be a good starter backpack. And again, it's not about finding one that's going to be perfect and comparable with those really high-end backpacks. We know that that's not what we're getting into, but it's about finding a backpack that will hold up long enough to sort of work our way up to another backpack and figure out what we like and dislike. With any backpack, your first backpack and first tent, all of those things are about really figuring out what you like and don't like. And I think this will probably do fine. But again, looking over it, I'm seeing a lot of single seams here. So I don't know if you can see that right there. This is where the shoulder strap attaches to the backpack, and we have one single seam that goes across there. So if that starts to wear it all, we're in big trouble, right? That could pop loose. And then if you're trying to backpack out with just one strap, that's going to be a mess. So again, that's one that we'll definitely keep an eye on as we go out for repeated trips. So you check it the first time you go out, and then as you're on your trip, you're watching to make sure that it's not sort of coming loose. And that's why it's also important to be cognizant of the weight that you're putting in your backpack. It's one thing to carry a lot of weight up the mountain. It's another to carry so much weight that your backpack starts to suffer, starts to fail. The shoulder straps, certainly fine, not great. I'm not super optimistic about that. But again, for a first backpack, I think this will probably do fine. And it says it's waterproof, so we'll see how that goes. So, I mean, we'll see. We'll see. More optimistic about the tent than this. So that's the big three. Let's start talking some of the little knickknacks here, right? Now, you don't get the name snack box without being really into cooking and snack sets and sort of food and that sort of thing. So the cook set that I got, I'm really excited about it. That's the Stanley 2-person nesting cook set. I've seen this in a number of the different big box stores. I've seen it in Target, seen it in Walmart, seen it in Dick's, those sort of places. And so I really wanted to get this one. I scooped it off of Amazon for $15, but you can often find it. It will typically run closer to about $20, $25. And I was really curious about it. And it has a number of features that I sort of like. Got this sort of locking handle mechanism. And so that's a really nice thing. One of my concerns is the sort of narrow. I will say one of my biggest concerns about this set is how small the circumference is on the bottom. Now, the volume is one thing. You need to have it big enough that you can hold a whole meal in it, but the bottom circumference is a real challenge. You see how it tapers off here, and that's a real concern for me because that's where the stove, it has to sit on the stove. So the smaller the circumference here, the more likely it is to tip. So I don't love that. It does, however, come with 2 of these cups. So presumably to share coffee with a friend. It says it's a 2-person setup. So that's pretty nice, but full disclosure, I have every intention to leave these home. I'm not going to carry those. I don't tend to carry a lot of mugs or coffee mugs, that sort of thing. They're thick and durable. It feels like they probably will be fine and kind of hold up in the woods. It does have those measuring cup markings where you can see exactly where your water fill line is. And I think that's a pretty decent sort of feature to it. And I think overall, this one is likely to be one of those sort of serviceable sets, not the ideal perfect set. And again, you know how much I love the GSI Soloist. It has that non-stick coating in it, and this one does not. So I also am going to be watching specifically for scorching and how hard it is to clean, particularly things like cheese. If I end up doing mac and cheese or something else that tends to stick really hard to the bottom and maybe even scorch, those kind of things are going to be of top priority to kind of figure out and see what exactly the range is of this being able to make a lot of different meals without ending up being more of a hassle on trail than anything. It's also worth noting that it has the strainer holes here. And so those strainer holes can be really, really invaluable for making sure that you're able to make a lot of the pastas out there, macaroni and cheese, all of the sort of standards, ramen, those things that backpackers tend to take. So I think overall, this one is probably one that I think is going to be very good. Maybe not great and maybe not perfect, but dollar for dollar, I think this is a great starter kit, particularly because when you're ready to really invest in a bigger, nicer set with some of that nonstick coating, something even lighter, smaller, than the stainless steel setup I have in front of me here. At that point, this is a great one to pass along. It's not one that's going to end up at a Goodwill, for example, or in the garbage. So I think it's probably a good set, not a great set. But those are just first looks. We'll see how it goes. I am hopeful that this will work well enough for me to use in the future. And it also would be the kind of thing that I would consider taking on, say, a hot tenting adventure where you leave it on the stove and just leave water boiling for tea or hot chocolate constantly. I think this would do really nicely for that. So looking forward to checking this one out. And you can't cook food without a stove. And so this is the stove that I picked up. It's the PS Cook portable backpacking stove. And so take a look at this one. This one is definitely a bigger box than say an MSR Whisper Lite, anything of the sort. And it's also dollar for dollar. It's not that much less expensive. It's about $13, and you can get the BRS titanium stove that is about the size of 2 3/4 for about $2-3 more. So I certainly think if I were buying a stove, I would go with that BRS stove. I think that one is just a really phenomenally done stove, dollar for dollar. It's really inexpensive, and I kind of think of it as one of the best values out there for any piece of backpacking gear. But I wanted to pick this one up specifically because it was less expensive. If we're looking for less expensive items, then this one is a really great one. And the other added bonus is, even though it's bigger and orange, we have a theme here, right? Even though it's bigger and orange, it does have the piezo starter here. So it has the auto starter. Now, if you've watched any of my videos before, you'll know that I personally dislike these a lot. I think they tend to fail, they tend to break, and that's universal. No matter if you're buying a $100 really nice Giga Snow Peak stove, or if you're buying this really cheap $13 PS Cook stove that's sort of a no-name brand. I think overall, I'm not super interested in that working or not working. I'm more interested in seeing how this sort of disperses the flame, how stable the pot is, and how likely it is to sort of cook quickly and efficiently. But they're basically just valves. And so in that case, it's really common to find a decent functional stove for an inexpensive price as a starter stove. It is heavier than what you would find with a MSR Pocket Rocket Deluxe or something comparable, but not enough to really notice. It's orange, so that's great. And basically, I think this is going to be a serviceable piece of gear that will work fine. But I also think that the lighter will be broken even before I get out on the trail. I think it's going to be fine. I think it'll work, but I'll report back and let you know and confirm that for you, or tell you otherwise if I'm wrong. All right, now we're getting down to the final items here. And this one is the Frogg Toggs. This is my rain gear. This is the Frogg Toggs rain suit. I've only got the pants in here. I've got the jacket hanging up because I use this regularly and routinely. This one comes in at about $20 to $25, depending on when you get it. I bought it last year for about $18, $19, but I think right now it's on sale for about $26, give or take. I love this piece of gear for rain protection. I also think that it's much more comfortable than a lot of other gear and a lot easier to use. So this is what I'll be taking, and you can check out my review on it right here. I love this piece of gear, and I think it's a great one, and not just a great one for the dollar amount. I just think it's a great piece of gear, and I think that because it's less expensive, it's a great option for a lot of people getting into backpacking. It's really comfortable. It's a lot easier to use than a poncho. Love this, definitely already recommend it. I've used it on a number of through hikes of the Colorado Trail so far, and I would recommend you do the same. And when I say do the same, I mean, I recommend you hike the Colorado Trail. What are you doing? Turn this off, go hike it. This might be one of the more controversial pieces of gear that I bought. I actually have two again, sort of like the sleeping bag. They sell them in sets of two. So if you're interested in trying one of your own, let me know. This is going to be my lighting option. It is a simple LED hat clip. And so for lighting up my way, ooh, green screen does not like that. Couldn't tell you ghost stories with it. You know what I mean? Basically what this is, it's super, super small, really light. It clips to the end of your hat. I believe I picked it up for somewhere in the ballpark of both of them, ran about $12 total. So about $5, $6 each. And so they're really light. They clip to the end of your hat. Last year I used this on the Colorado Trail and I did like it. I did find that the battery died relatively quickly. So the battery died. It's a CR2032. It's the one that you would put in, say, your Apple TV remote. So you can carry a couple of others, but I found that this one worked well enough for a shorter trip. But I already can tell you that this is not a great option for the long haul, especially because if it gets wet, I think it tends to sort of short out. It's not super durable, but for a shorter trip, if you do run into rain, you clip it under the bill of the hat rather than on top of the bill of the hat, and you are going to be just fine. And now the final piece of gear. This one I am so fascinated and curious about. These are the trekking poles that I picked up. They were $22, I believe, somewhere in that ballpark. They were not terribly expensive. Already I can tell you they're heavier than my current pair of trekking poles. And let's open them up and figure out what we're looking at. It's got extra goodies in there. Got our trekking poles. And then they sent us some giblets, apparently. The little bag here has different tips for the trekking pole, so a little bit lighter on the environment. It's also got the snow bowls, or the little snow caps that you put on there to make sure that you can still use it in the snow. Definitely like that. Has a number of different clips, that sort of thing. I want to talk to you about what makes the really expensive trekking poles really expensive, because it's not just that these are just a bunch of nerdy Europeans telling you that they're worth a lot more money than they are. Typically what you have is a more comfortable handle, so one that is made of a little bit different foam. So right now when I'm looking at this handle here, what you're getting is this is hard plastic, and that is going to not be great for a lot of hiking situations. If your hands get sweaty, then these tend to slip, and when they start slipping even a little bit, that's when blistering tends to happen. So I don't really love that just yet. And then also the weight, these are pretty heavy, and weight for a trekking pole is a pretty big deal because your elbows can get really sore and exhausted. If you've ever gotten tennis elbow or fisherman's elbow, those sort of overuse injuries or sort of repeated use injuries, these are heavier, so they will likely make those flare up faster, if they're going to flare up at all. The other thing that makes a really expensive trekking pole really expensive is not just a material that's lighter, that's really strong, because these are probably just as strong as some of those other materials, or at least strong enough that you're never going to notice a difference. It's going to be these guys here. So the connections that tighten up and make sure that it's fixed at a stable length, those are going to be harder or easier based on the different types of trekking poles. And specifically, they're going to be good with things like wearing gloves, right? So if you have a really easy one to use while you're wearing gloves, that's much better. You're also going to find some that are going to be much more stable and hold to, and some that will break easier. So that locking mechanism here is absolutely essential. I can tell you right now, I don't love this one. I can't really figure out how to lock it just yet. So we're going to have to see what we're doing here with it and kind of tinker with it. Basically what you do is you twist it and you lock it in place. You can hear it just locked there, and then you kind of unlock it. So it looks like it's locking in place pretty okay. We'll see how it goes. It does have the measurements here. It's nice for making sure that they are locked at the same length for each one. That way you can make sure that they're pretty even, because nothing will make you crazier on the trail. If one is a little shorter than the other, you will absolutely notice. And the other piece here, you're going to use that whenever you're setting up your trekking pole tent. So it will help make sure that your trekking pole is at least dialed in close to that length that you want it when you're setting up your tent. I like the color. It's a nice silver color, which I think is pretty good. I know color might be one of those things that you're thinking, snack box, I don't really care about color, but let me tell you, if you have trekking poles that are a natural color, so that orange color, brown color, green, any of those, then they can be lost really easily when you get out there in the woods and set them down to go to the bathroom or something of the sort. Well, I think that about covers it, everybody. I appreciate you sticking around. I really enjoyed talking about all that new gear. You know how I love gear. Stay tuned. I'm going to be doing some comparisons of this gear with some higher end gear throughout the course of the next few months. And then in mid-May, I'm going to be taking all of this gear out in the woods to try it out on a 3-day Smoky Mountains loop hike. We're going to do about 25 to 30 miles and really test out this gear by way of comfort, utility, and function. So stay tuned. Be sure you click like and subscribe so that you can keep up on all of that and check out whether or not you can get away with a little bit cheaper gear in the woods. Also, if you haven't found me already, send me a message on Instagram at Backcountry Champion and say, hey, Snackbox, hit me up with one of those sweet Outside Comfort Zone stickers and I will get one in the mail to you. And I might even send one of the old retro Outside Comfort Zone stickers to you. So I think that about covers it, everybody. I appreciate you. Hang in there, and I'll talk to you soon. The Snackbox out, everyone.